Hello, everybody, and I am delighted to welcome you today. Thank you for joining us. Many thanks to the New York City's Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment for hosting this panel, which is part of their initiative of New York Music Month Extended Play and is on HADESTOWN, the blurring and creative interplay between theatre and live music. The reigning Tony Award-winning musical Hadestown celebrates the best of American folk and New Orleans-inspired jazz. I'm delighted to welcome today Todd Sykafus, the Tony-winning co-orchestrator, along with band members Marika Hughes, who plays the cello, and Dana Lynn on violin. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining today.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Together they have decades of experience. Todd is part of Arnie DeFranco's band. Marika has done stadium tours and played with artists including Whitney Houston, Adele, and Taylor Mac. Dana has released 8 solo albums under her name and is also a composer. I'm Imogen, an SVP at Concord Theatricals, which is proud to represent the stock and amateur licensing of Hadestown. And I'm also a contributor to ABC News. My personal thanks to ABC for allowing me to take part today. This is a 45-minute moderated discussion, and I will then turn it over to a Q&A, so get your questions going, and we'll be delighted to go to them at the end of today. So Todd, I guess I'm going to start with you, as you've worked with Anais Mitchell, Hadestown's creator, for the longest. For anyone joining today who knows nothing about Hadestown, set the scene for us, the world of Hadestown. It's based on an ancient Greek myth, correct?
That's right. Yeah, more than one myth woven together. The point that I intersected first with Anais was around 2006, and at that point she had already been working on Hadestown in Vermont, where she was living for a little bit. She had started to, and I think this is common for people who come to musicals through a back door, in the sense of writing songs and suddenly realizing that there's a story and a through line, and this deserves to be on the stage, and this could have a life on a stage more than just music. I've heard this story more than once, but she was experiencing a little bit of that. She was putting Hadestown onto the stage in Vermont in a very DIY way. I intersected with their world at this point, and it was beautiful, and you wouldn't have described it as anything but a weird art project that was happening regionally with amazing, talented, creative, out of the box thinking people. I was lucky to go be a part of it at that point because Anais had asked me to produce an album version of what she had made at that point, which
2010, wasn't it? So it's quite a while ago we're talking about.
Well, you know what? This was 2006 when those conversations were happening. The record we eventually finished, and it came out in 2010. You're right. So in 2006, I said, if I'm going to really understand this, I need to go to Vermont and be a part of this. So I did, rode the yellow school bus, played bass in the show. And like you are hinting at with the title of this presentation today, it was coming from a real music place. All the singers were singer-songwriters, not necessarily just coming from a theater place. And that was the state of things in 2006. I did, for a friend here in Eugene, Oregon, where I live, I did a little talk with her drama students recently, and they notified me after I told a little bit about that story that that they weren't born in 2006. So I realized this is a while ago. They're young.
You're making us feel old, Todd, already, honestly.
No, not me. Tell me about it.
So it really is the most extraordinary process. At what point, Rachel Chavkin, obviously a very renowned director, then comes on board? It must have, did it really change at that point, Todd? The nature of the piece, where it was going?
Yeah, well, the major thing that happened is let's bring this back to the stage. For many years, it had just been a music only project, which made a lot of sense. And had a lot of joy to it, and a sense of community, and brought people together from all over the place. And it's really milked that part of the process in a beautiful way. But because of Mara Isaacs, the producer, Rachel Chafkin, when she was introduced to Aeneas, the idea of expanding the music to be a complete show that would tell the whole story or the whole set of stories, that was hatched at that point. And at that point, you know, and the years that followed directly after that, the piece was expanded to twice the size. You know, instead of this hour's album worth of music that we had, it became a 2+ hour show.
So I'm fascinated, Dana, Marika, when did you come on board in this process? When did you fall in love, as it were, with Hadestown? When were you lured into the Hadestown circle? Marika, perhaps I'll start with you.
I have this subway in my backyard. I just have to wait for it to go away. Okay. Todd and I have known each other since the 90s, and we were already grown-ups, and we were playing together in bands in the Bay Area. And so I joined Hadestown, or got on my radar when Todd called me to play on the first recorded, is that the first recorded material time? Yeah. So that record that came out in 2010, I played cello on that, and that's the first time I sort of got hip to the whole scene.
And Dana, how about you?
I got the call from Todd before the New York Theater Workshop production, which was 2016. So off Broadway, I think it was 3 months, 4 months maybe. And I think maybe it was, I'm not actually sure if that was Chafkin's first.
It was.
Yeah. So
they had been working for years at that point together, but that was the first production back on stage. Yeah.
What is it, do you think, about the piece that speaks to people? Dana, I'll ask you that, because on some levels you came in last, but you've watched this journey.
What do I think about
the piece? What do you think? Why do you think it speaks to people? Why do you think it's taken on the life that it has?
Well, I think, generally speaking, mythology deals with the basics of humankind and human nature. These myths exist for a very long time for a reason, because people still, not only do they love them for the sweetness of them and the sort of folkloric aspects, but because people can still learn from these stories in some way. They're timeless. And so I think that, I don't know, I grew up learning about Greek myths. I think everyone can find something very relatable about all of these characters.
And Marika, this sounds like something that you kept coming back to. If you want it from 2010, you obviously had this hugely successful career going on, but there's something about Hadestown that made you keep coming back to the piece.
Well, Todd kept calling. I mean,
you never had honestly, too much Marika Hughes.
In the beginning, it was really like it was a gig, it was a session. I was like, okay, I'll come play on this recording session, you know, of course. And then I would hear little bits and pieces about it, but I didn't have anything to do with it. And then Todd, when he called Dana, I was one of the people he called then to be a part of the show. And we're talking about being musicians and Hadestown. We're all musicians in this show that have never played Broadway before. Mm. And we're all coming from a creative music place. We all are band leaders. We don't tend to live in theater. So it was cool for Todd to call us to play this music, because we brought something very different to it. And I think I would have come back again to another kind of show. This was much more like chamber music, and it was acoustic initially, and it felt different than what I had understood theater hit playing to be, and better.
I think that's a very interesting point. I think I'm right in saying that none of the orchestra are actual Broadway pit regulars, and everyone has had creative musical lives outside of Hadestown. I think that's right, Marika and Dana.
I have experience in subbing on Broadway, and in the pit, always in the pit. So I have that to compare it to. And I was also actually an on-stage musician in 4 different productions before this.
At BAM and the Public Theatre. So there was that element.
Yeah, off Broadway, and something, the BAM thing was actually co-produced by the old Vic. So it was this project that went around the world. So I do have experience in that regard, but it's also very different from a Broadway musical. It's very different.
And it does sound like how the band is comprised is a totally different experience, probably, Dana, than you've ever had before in this environment. Is that fair to say?
It's completely different from being in a pit. I can tell you that. It's totally different. And it's you're on stage, you're visible. And so you always have that little bit of, I don't want to use the word tension, but that's the only word that's coming to mind. There's this bit of, you have to sit up straight, no matter how many times you do this, it's like, you're still on stage. You're still, you aren't going to start stretching out your shoulders or something, like, as you would in the pit. Or honestly, I've watched people play in the pit, play their entire shows for memory while watching baseball games. Honestly, I've seen this happen many times. So
I'm going to have to find out those names later on. I want to know which shows. I mean, it really is so extraordinary what you all do. Marika, was there anything that surprised you about working on Broadway?
Well, yeah, that I actually kind of like it. I've avoided routine my whole life. Okay. I've never do the same thing again and again. I've intentionally made my life a way that avoids that. And then it turns out that I respond really well to routine. So I like the vocational part of it. I like seeing Brandon at the front door, at the backstage door every day and saying hi. I like kibitzing with Vinny, the electrician who's been in the building since 1980. Playing the same thing for me every day is not a goal. That's not something I've intended to do with my life. I can enjoy it and I can find ways to make it interesting for myself every day. I think the actors do that too. Doing the same thing every day is not magic. That's hard work. And to make it in a way that comes across to the audience that it's like really effective, that's not magic every day. That's skill and hard work. So the other parts of it that I really enjoy, that is not creative, is the interpersonal relations with the people in the building.
That's a very interesting point you have there. When I live in New York, I moved from London 11 years ago, and when I lived in the UK, there was all this talk of the Broadway community. Maybe you saw the Tony Awards, and it was all the thank you to the Broadway community. And I thought, really? And it was very interesting when I moved here. I realized the Broadway community is so much a thing, and we've obviously missed that environment beyond anything in the past 18 months. But Todd, how about that for you? Because you've obviously been in this project so long. You've seen through so many different stages, from the folk music stage, small concept album stage, through to Broadway. How have you found the Broadway community? How have you found how they welcomed Hadestown to the fold?
Well, I mean, there were different sides of it. In some ways, it had a little protective bubble around it, and that there are some people to thank for that. Rachel Chavkin, and so in some ways, we were coming into a way of doing things that I know I had some things to learn about, process and logistics, and but there's also a lot of flexibility and creativity and welcoming in that world, in that community. And so that was in full effect. And honestly, I feel like the response that we've often got is a little bit of, well, we don't exactly do it like that, but then also, hey, but that's cool. That's a good way of doing things, or an interest in finding new ways to work. I don't know if there's anything particularly different about Hadestown other than we stewed the music for so long, in ways that maybe other shows don't get the chance to do, but I actually think that most people would like to work that way if they could. You know, there's nothing better than a creative team being able to work for long enough that all the different points start influencing all the other different points. And, you know, instead of one thing being built on another and everything down at the bottom staying the same. Do you know what I mean?
It's that evolution. And Marika, you had a ringside seat on that. That must be, I don't want to put words in my mouth. Is that one of the highlights of your career, to have watched how it grew and how it was a small project and then became this 8 times Tony Award winning musical?
Yeah, it's been wonderful to see this happen and to see how Aeneas kept changing things and developing it, and Todd and Michael were constantly being like, no, don't play that, play this, you know, over the years. It's been wonderful to watch, and it's fun to be a part of a successful show. I mean, I gotta say, it's a pleasure.
And for you, Dana, I mean, before it, and we will get to that, before it all sort of went crazy last March, happy place for you to go to every day? Did you enjoy, because you've obviously been around the world with other shows?
I have to agree with Marika in the community that existed within our theater. Another part of being on stage also meant that the actors you know, saw us every day, saw us on stage every day. We all have each other's backs in that way. When I was in the pit before, you know, most of the time there'd be no interaction at all between these two groups. So that adds to the experience of playing a show, I feel. And it was honestly, it was such a pleasure to see these people work on stage. I mean, Andre, I mean, I just feel that we are very blessed to watch this man do this part.
Yeah.
You know.
Can I say something?
Of course.
I think the audience can feel that too. I think one of the cool things about having, you know, Marika and Dana are brilliant musicians, improvisers. You know, there's a level of spontaneity that they kind of exude that isn't even used to its, you know, to its full extent in this show. But to see musicians of that caliber on stage watching the actors, an audience can feel the intensity of that even in a way that I have appreciated when I've been out front. And I think the actors, that's more fuel for the actors too.
Now, I freely admit, I went to our music and pubs team before I came to today, and they've been working very closely, I think with you, Todd, with Aeneas on HADESTOWN, because it is a show that is now in our catalogue. So I do have a question, Todd, for you from them, which I'm going to read out, because it's sort of getting into the weeds a little bit.
Is it about editing that piano arrangement? I swear I'll send that tomorrow.
Yeah, okay. They're probably watching and taking notes right now. They've asked, and I do think this is interesting for those, you know, who are interested in this side of things, who are watching today. They've said that you're a co-orchestrator with Michael Chorney on HADESTOWN. Is there a natural division of work? Do you work on songs separately, or do each of you specialize in different parts with each music chart?
Yeah, I mean, I wish Michael were here so that we could answer this together. We'd be smiling at each other's difficulty with this question, because it's 13 years and it's a deep question, and you collaborate for so long on something as wide-reaching as this. And I mean, I swear there's things that I think that he was responsible for that he would swear that I'm responsible for. I mean, we've talked about those details, but in general, you know, he laid a whole bunch of foundation before I even showed up. So, you know, there's a kind of Michael Chorney DNA that is so beautiful and so baked into this piece that as the third person to start working on it, I don't, I wouldn't know how to start talking about some of that stuff. It's just, it might as well be Aeneas's. It's so baked into the core of what Hadestown is and what the music of it is. Aeneas is such a wonderful collaborator. So Michael and I have always had a lot of room from her to use our imagination. And, in general, as it expanded, there was a kind of transition of our roles, but, it would only be interesting to musicians or composers, I think, not to the general public, but I loved working with Michael over those years, and he's a real genius, and it's been a beautiful thing to be a part of.
Well, Marika and Dana, I also have a question from the Music and Pubs team for you both. They're interested to know, are there any particular passages that you find particularly tricky on any given night? And then are there any particular passages that you always look forward to playing? So Dana, I'll take that to you first.
I look forward to playing Way Down that
Way
one,
Down
number 10. Number 10, because it's a big party.
Yeah.
And that's fun. I like the big parties.
Yeah.
I have to be honest and say that I don't actually find any difficulties with this part. It's very well written for my instrument. And the things that I don't like doing as a violin player, which is like going up into the stratosphere like this, doesn't happen, which is great. Thank you guys.
Well done, Aeneas. Well done, Todd. That's good to know. How about you, Marika?
I would agree with Dana. I think it's really fun to play the party scenes because, the actors are dancing around and everybody's like winking at each other. We do all these things that nobody in the audience can see, which is really fun to be a part of on stage. And then I get to play this little solo towards the end. What's it called? What's that Anyway, it's really fun. That comes in. It's really fun, and it's like 8 bars of like something slightly Baroque that just has this. It's really a pleasure. Sits in the hand. But like Dana, I say, they wrote it for you to be able to play. So there's nothing to fear technically.
Can I add? I've got an answer to this question as someone who has subbed on the show on bass. The hardest thing for the string players, or at least for me when I did it, is that there's no time to tune. You've got an hour and there's something intense happening. There's a lot of really quiet moments. Anyway.
I feel like I should be taking notes for us to put on our website for when eventually, kids in schools have to do this, because helpful very much for them. I do want to touch on the past 16 months, because they've obviously been incredibly tough for everyone, but those in the arts have been really challenged. How have you at Hadestown stayed connected? Marika, maybe do you want to go, or have you not? I mean, have you checked in? I mean, how have you coped?
Well, as it relates to Hadestown, I think it's really lovely. The band is tight. We all knew each other before we started doing this, so it was we have a natural hang, anyway. So we used to go to the bar across the street, Hurley's from the theater, for shows, and so we kept having our Hurley's hang and would just do it on Zoom. And the cast, there's a 20-something person thread on text of cast and crew and wardrobe and everybody that's been yammering together the whole time. And I will say that something also, because this does relate to musicians very specifically and actors, is health insurance.
Yeah.
And we were in a pandemic losing our health insurance. And something very special about Hadestown, I will say, is that me, the cellist, where on most shows nobody would know who my name is except the music department, I could call our producer and talk to her directly about our needs, and she responded in kind. That's really unusual, and I think that has to be more the norm everywhere. But that was something very special that happened as relates to Hadestown and our experience as a community. Because that's part of being a community, is the people in power taking care of the people that are working for you.
So on some levels, Dana, it sounds like, in a strange way, not that you're closer together, but you're certainly closer in a different way.
Yeah, I would say that because I mean, hopefully it won't be every day that we experience something like this again, but it's always something difficult that brings you together and makes you have difficult discussions and open up. Because we did have these weekly hangs, and also might add that 2 of our band members are based in Vermont. And right. Both Marika and I have been up to Vermont and have seen them and have hung out and played music. And so there's been these little pockets of joy also when we are actually able to be around each other. I just actually got back from Vermont like a week ago. So it's actually a beautiful testament to the music bringing us together and to being friends, because Michael and Rob from Vermont, are the only people actually that we met through this gig 5 years ago.
And I was going to ask, as musicians, how do you keep sharp? I mean, Dana, I mean, how do you, I mean, are you playing every day? Are you not? My sister-in-law is a viola player, and she says she actually she's got to the point where she doesn't need to practice every day. She's in the pits in the West End, but it's
very special then.
But you're
I honestly, if I didn't practice for 2 days, then everything would just crumble to pieces. That might just be my mind, but honestly, it would crumble to pieces. Like I remember thinking when I was a young person, oh, there will be a day when I don't have to play my scales, and that day is never coming. And and the day when it got more difficult came earlier than I thought it would.
That's really interesting. But but it also, does it bring you, I guess, a degree of peace though, Dana? I'd say in the middle of all of this, something familiar to go back to.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've been playing since I was like before I could stand and look at the piano. My keyboard is actually my first instrument, and it's just a language. It's like talking or eating So in terms of sometimes I view the slow practice as just meditation. That's like the way I meditate. Think about sound. Think about the physical aspect of playing my instruments. Like let my brain figure other things out that I need to figure out. So it's there. I will say that I do view the violin as a more social instrument, and sometimes I would be a little depressed because I wasn't playing at the rate that I usually play with people, and so then I put it down and picked up the viola, and then I switched back. So that's
You're also lucky. It's easier to transport as well. My uncle's a cellist, and that was a nightmare having to figure that one out. Marika, how about you? How did you approach the past 16 months?
Well, first of all, I just want to say that Dana is like a triathlete as a musician, and is an extraordinary artist in the world. And I admire how the artist that she is, truly, and the work that is. I am not like Dana, and I don't practice nearly as much as Dana does, but I do practice, and I play Bach for my own pleasure. And I'm still trying to understand how to play over changes in the way I'd want to. So I probably spend less time with technique and more with other things. And I wrote a number of songs over this time. I stopped I didn't drill myself so hard, but I just sort of did whatever brought me pleasure musically. And then the first gig I played with other people, Dana, it was you, me, Brian, and Ben, at the Brooklyn Conservatory last April or something. We all had like 5 masks on, but I was like floating. Hey, at the best time. We did it streaming for some gala or something. It was so fun.
So I keep going on mute because there is this thunderstorm going on in New York City at the moment, which is insane. I also just want to go to something that's really important. There's a recent initiative to bring gender and racial diversity to the band for the Broadway production. Marika, I think what you all did was very powerful. And I don't know if you're able to speak a little bit about what happened and how you approach that.
I would love to speak to this. Thank you for asking. You know, when we got to Broadway, having a Broadway gig is a privilege because it adds, you have health insurance, something goes into your pension, you're paying into Social Security. So this is a kind of stability that typically as musicians we don't have. And historically, Broadway it's been contracted by white men who hire white men, and then some more recently women. Black and brown people have struggled to get on the lists and haven't been called because racism. So as soon as Dana and I had these chairs, we had to even have like an unspoken agreement. We just both knew like we were going to open the doors now to musicians who have been kept out and hire them as our subs. And that this statement didn't happen all of a sudden. I can say that I spent a year downstairs in the basement where the band has our dressing rooms, like trying to get our other band members to hire Black people and women. And there was struggle, and you know, everybody has different ways of doing things. And that was a challenge, you know, and then this happened, we got shut down, George Floyd was murdered, and some of us had to start to re-engage in understanding our role as gatekeepers to possibility and change. And so we came eventually to understand how to write this statement, which Dana wrote, I have to say. And additionally, we have had meetings with producers and our contractors and the band to talk about this. I'm only sorry that we haven't had to make this statement at all. I wish that people would understand that there has been an exclusion of talented people, Black people and brown people, from work. And we can make a change, and all we have to do is hire them. We shouldn't have to take 2 years to write a statement for that to happen.
It wasn't
so anyway, this is difficult. This is very difficult stuff. I mean, we spend hours on Zoom discussing this. This doesn't happen overnight, and it's difficult, and we argue, we disagree. But we, as a band, have worked together in 2 big ways to stand up for ourselves and to stand up for something we believe in. And I'm very proud of that.
And you've had the conversation, and Dana, writing that statement, I mean, that's huge and so much on you to put together.
Actually, it took me probably less than 10 minutes to write that, honestly. It was, I just wanted to be direct and just as clear as possible. And maybe after all that time of talking and also, you know, it can't be couched in any sort of nicety or any sort of politeness or something. It just has to be as direct as possible. And so actually it was, I guess it took a lot of time for us all to get to this point. And honestly, I'm not really a social media person. So I only just got a smartphone like 2 weeks ago. Some of these things are very new to me, but writing that statement or that kind of communication came quite easily.
Absolutely. Todd, you must be very proud of the team.
Absolutely. And I have to say, this is coming from them. It's been interesting to hear people who don't know anything about how these kind of shows work to realize that is something that the band has the purview over, and that's a way to make change that maybe hadn't occurred to some people who wouldn't be able to have a way of knowing about that. Is that what you found, Marika?
Well, I think I'm going to just I'm not couching my words. I think a lot of white liberal people only live around white liberal people like themselves, or white people. And Black people and brown people live with each other and with white people. So there's a gap in our experience of analysis of what race really, how it constructs our society. And a lot of white people are just coming to terms with now what their role is and how this system has worked, and the lies people have been fed and told about why Black people, why we were in the circumstances they might think we are. So there's a gap in knowledge. And I think that's where trouble happens. And that's where the patience has to exist as we discuss these things and come to understand how structures of white supremacy in our society work everywhere. If you're a person,
I'm glad you had a chance to say that. And what I meant was that Broadway musicians hire their own subs.
We're coming towards the end of our section, and also hopefully the end of the COVID acute crisis. When do you go back into rehearsal? What's the plan? You've now announced your date. It's the beginning of September. So Todd, when are you all back together in a room?
I don't know. When did the rehearsals start? You guys know better than I do.
Dana and Marika. You don't know yet.
August 26th.
You must be beyond excited. How do you think it's going to feel when you're back? And I guess are you going straight to the theatre, or are you going to be in a rehearsal room? How's it going to work?
One would guess straight to the theater, right? It's just been sitting there empty. It's waiting for people to come in.
Did you go back? I was hearing some stories from some musicians during the pandemic. Did you go back sort of in April to pick up your belongings? I heard that was the weirdest experience, going into the theatres at that point. Marika?
Well, I remember the night we closed, and it was like the mad dash to get to the theater, they were like, you have 2 hours to get what you need, run. And then in April, it was just still so fresh. It seems like so long ago now, but yeah. I remember that, and the ghost light was still on the theater,
I think it's going to be an extraordinary moment when you are all back together. Now, before I turn it over, I do know that you've all got some exciting projects going on. Dana, you have a festival that you're doing in a park, correct? Happening this summer?
Yeah. Well, there's a new park that is on just off the West Side Highway called Little Island. It's across the street from the Whitney Museum, so you can do a twofer. And they're doing a festival in August. And Marika and I and the incomparable violinist Charlie Burnham are playing original music on August 19th in the section called The Glade. So come and say hello.
Oh, summer playing sounds amazing. Marika, how about you, along with that project?
Well, I have a barn upstate, and it's a nonprofit called Looking Glass Arts, and this summer is our first summer of programming, and we're offering 6 recording residencies for artists to come and record in the barn, and doesn't cost them anything, and they leave with the hard drive of their record. So I'm excited about that.
Incredible. And Todd, how about you? What are you up to for the summer before back to school, as it were?
Well, one of the things is back playing with Ani DeFranco for some concerts, including one in New York at Summer Stage, I believe. This is one of those concerts that was supposed to happen before COVID and has been rescheduled something like 4 times. So fingers crossed, we'll be there in September.
Fingers crossed. Right, I am going to go over to some questions. So first up from Amy Rose. Do you see the band members as characters in the world of HADESTOWN? Dana, you get to go first.
No.
No?
I think we're sort of like the musical chorus. I don't feel like we're cast members. I feel like we're part. I don't know if that makes sense. I mean, we're part of the fabric, but...
Chorus, I like that. Greek chorus, that makes sense. Marika, How do you feel?
Yeah, I feel similarly. I don't feel like we're a character, but we're a part of the jester, the court, Yeah.
Great. Peter has said 14th of September can't come soon enough. I thought it was earlier than that, 4th of September.
I think it's the 2nd.
Well, there we go. So I think that's the wrong date. Peter, are there any other questions? I am looking at the Q&A document. Things are moving. Amy says that my cat has a very important thing to say, meow. So thank you to that. Has that been a thing during the pandemic when you're sort of trying to do your, I don't know, playing over Zoom? I don't know. Has there been some interesting moments with pets or not?
I don't have a pet.
Don't have a pet.
I don't
Dana,
either.
no.
Little children. That's
little
been
children
at my feet.
What are your favorite songs in the show to play? Marika, slightly touched on this earlier.
Well, it's like a sieve. When I play this show again, I'll be like, oh my God, this, oh yeah, this. And Dana, what is it? Where is it? Is it the first piece, or Todd, you tell me where I have I have to pluck an A, and like that has to happen at the right time, or everybody's screwed for the rest of the way.
It's any way the wind blows.
There you go. I remember that's fun to do, right?
Oh yeah, there's actually later in that song, I think my favorite harmonic moment happens. It's really simple, and it's just something going to like an inverted 5, like chord in D. And there are a couple of moments like that. Whenever they come around, I'm like, oh, that's so nice. That it's so simple. And I can't tell you exactly where it is. It's like sort of second page, like third line to the bottom. It's a really nice chord. I think when he talks about the muse, and then there's this ding.
I can't wait to go back now. Todd, how about you? Or is it like asking you to pick a favorite child? If you have a favorite song?
You know what? I had this experience just this afternoon of feeling like, God, my head is not in this music. I wonder if I should listen to something for a second. I just put the needle down on If It's True, and found myself listening to the whole way to the end, having the experience that Marika just described of just a sequence of moments that filled me with memories. And yeah, there's a richness. And I was also thinking about the topic of rock music and how funny it is a little bit to talk about coming from a concert or a rock music mindset into HADESTOWN, because there's such a gentleness to the music. Also, there's this kind of storytelling around a fire kind of feeling that's always been a part of it, and the scale of it. So what was your question?
Do you have a favorite number, as it were?
No. Anything that Andre is singing.
Oh, I can't wait to see Andre again. Well, it looks like we've got no more questions. So my huge thanks to Todd Sykafus, Marika Hughes, and Dana Lynn. And I know I speak for everyone when we're so excited to see HADESTOWN back on Broadway. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good evening. And if you're in New York, try and stay dry. Take care.